A princess entered a royal palace, but she could never become a mother and was no longer a wife. Her life turned into a secret. The question is, what really happened to her? And who was the one who ruined it all? What happens when a fairy tale marriage hides a deadly secret? When a teenage princess walks into a royal palace, unaware that her new life will cost her more than just freedom. It will steal her future as a mother. At just 17 years old, Princess Stephanie of Belgium married the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But instead of stepping into a life of luxury and love, she stepped into a medical tragedy. A mysterious illness soon rendered her sterile, and rumors began swirling in Viennese salons. Some whispered of poisons, others suspected political enemies. But the truth was far simpler and far more devastating. Stephanie's infection wasn't caused by a rare disease or a secret enemy. It was the result of her husband's recklessness. In the 19th century, sexually transmitted diseases were a quiet weapon, used and ignored by powerful men. These diseases wrecked the lives of countless aristocratic women, and Stephanie was one of them. To understand her tragedy, we need to go back to the world she came from. Stephanie Clotilde Louise Hermine Marie Charlotte was born on May 21, 1864, in the royal castle of Laeken, Belgium. She was the daughter of King Leopold II, one of the most controversial monarchs in European history. While he ruled Belgium, he also privately owned the Congo Free State, where millions of Africans were killed and enslaved under his orders. At home, Leopold wasn't any kinder. He focused only on his son and ignored his daughters. Stephanie grew up in a cold household. Her parents, Leopold and Queen Marie Henriette of Austria, were locked in an unhappy marriage. The king was openly unfaithful, and the queen eventually gave up and retreated from public life. Stephanie's education was shallow. She was taught languages and etiquette, but not real-world knowledge, especially not about relationships, reproduction, or health. This ignorance would later turn into a lifelong curse. In 1879, at just 15 years old, Stephanie's father began arranging her marriage. To him, she wasn't a daughter. She was a bargaining chip. He saw her marriage as a political alliance with the powerful Austro-Hungarian Empire. Her future husband? Crown Prince Rudolph, a 21-year-old, known for his unstable emotions and reckless habits. In March 1880, Rudolph traveled to Brussels to meet Stephanie. The meeting was staged by diplomats, but Rudolph seemed truly taken with her. He wrote to his mother, Empress Elizabeth, calling Stephanie beautiful and intelligent. What he didn't write about were his own secrets, his frequent visits to brothels, and worse, a sexually transmitted disease, gonorrhea. This information was carefully hidden from the Belgian royal family. The engagement was officially announced on March 7, 1880, but the wedding had to be delayed due to an embarrassing discovery. When Stephanie was sent to Vienna to prepare for court life, the palace staff found she hadn't even reached puberty. More shockingly, she had no idea how reproduction worked. She was sent back to Belgium to mature. Her parents had failed her completely. They had kept her ignorant, treated her like property, and sent her into a marriage without preparation. Finally, on May 10, 1881, 17-year-old Stephanie married Rudolph in a grand ceremony in Vienna's St. Augustine's Church. Royals from across Europe attended, including the future Edward VII of England and Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale. At first, the marriage seemed happy. Stephanie loved her new role as crown princess, and Rudolph was kind to her. In 1883, she gave birth to a daughter, Archduchess Elizabeth Marie. It gave hope for the Habsburg dynasty, but darkness was just beneath the surface.
What if the greatest threat to a princess wasn't war, poison, or politics, but her own husband's secret life? After the birth of their daughter in 1883, Crown Princess Stephanie believed she was fulfilling her role. But behind closed doors, Crown Prince Rudolf continued living a dangerous and selfish life. He returned to his habits, frequenting brothels and entertaining multiple mistresses, and with those affairs came a ticking time bomb. By 1886, the nightmare exploded. Rudolf gave Stephanie a serious sexually transmitted disease, likely the same gonorrhea he had carried for years. For a 22-year-old royal bride, it was a horrifying blow. In those times, there were no antibiotics. Such infections spread to the reproductive organs, causing unbearable pain, chronic pelvic diseases, and worst of all, permanent infertility. Stephanie suffered through all of it. Physically, her body was damaged forever. She would never be able to bear another child. Emotionally, the betrayal shattered her. Her husband hadn't just cheated, he had handed her a lifetime sentence of pain and failure. In the royal world of the 19th century, a woman's main duty was to produce heirs. To be sterile was to be considered worthless. But Stephanie wasn't born infertile. She was made that way by the man who had vowed to love her. Yet Rudolf blamed her. Despite being the one who passed the infection, he accused Stephanie of failing to provide more children. His hypocrisy was cruel and open. Their relationship broke down completely. Divorce was even discussed, an unthinkable option for Catholic royalty. Stephanie, heartbroken and trapped, began to withdraw. But she also started seeking comfort elsewhere. During a trip to Galicia, she had a romantic affair with a Polish count, a small escape from the pain and rejection she endured daily. Meanwhile, Rudolf spiraled into deeper instability. His use of alcohol and other substances increased. His depression grew darker. He kept adding mistresses to his life, trying to drown out guilt and shame with pleasure. But nothing worked. He was haunted by his actions and the consequences. By the late 1880s, his mental state had worsened dangerously. And then came the final tragedy that would shake the empire. On January 30th, 1889, the royal court was rocked by shocking news. Crown Prince Rudolf was found dead in a hunting lodge at Meiling, lying next to the lifeless body of his 17-year-old mistress, Baroness Mary Vetsera. The official explanation, a tragic joint suicide. But the whispers never stopped. Some blamed political enemies, others believed Rudolf was assassinated, but no theory could erase the truth. His reckless life had destroyed not only himself, but everyone closest to him, especially Stephanie. At just 24 years old, Stephanie became a widow. She was free from the nightmare marriage, but deeply scarred. She had suffered betrayal, infection, infertility, and now the public shame of her husband's scandalous death. What if a princess's greatest scandal wasn't about love affairs or conspiracies, but about how society ignored her suffering and blamed her for a disease she never caused? After Crown Prince Rudolf's shocking death in 1889, Stephanie of Belgium stood alone. At just 24, she was an imperial widow. Many thought her story ended there, but her real battle was just beginning. The disease Rudolf had given her had permanently damaged her body. She would never have more children. Yet society didn't see her as a victim. Instead, she was shamed for not giving the Habsburg dynasty a male heir. Nobody asked what had happened to her, only what she had failed to do. Stephanie's tragedy was not a secret crime or hidden murder. It was a silent epidemic of her time. In the 19th century, sexually transmitted diseases like gonorrhea were extremely common among European aristocratic men. Many noblemen caught infections from brothels or mistresses and passed them on to their wives. The wives suffered, with pain, infertility, and emotional damage. But society never held the men accountable. Instead, women like Stephanie were blamed for being barren, for not producing sons, for not keeping their husbands happy. And worst of all, for diseases they didn't even understand, because no one had taught them. Stephanie had been kept in ignorance from the start. Her parents never told her about reproduction. She was sent into marriage knowing nothing about intimacy or health. This ignorance wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Royal girls were raised to be obedient, not informed. This made them easy targets. Stephanie's story is far from unique. Countless other royal and noble women suffered the same fate. They were infected by careless husbands and blamed for the consequences. It was a pattern hidden behind the glamour of royal courts. In 1900, Stephanie remarried. Her second husband was a Hungarian nobleman, Count Elemer Lonier. It was a love match, and she hoped for a peaceful life. But the disease had left her infertile. She never had more children. Still, she found some happiness. She lived a long life, dying in 1945 at the age of 81. She survived both her cruel father, King Leopold II, and her tragic husband, Rudolf. She lived through 2 world wars and saw the fall of the empire she once belonged to. Her only daughter, Archduchess Elizabeth Marie, continued the family line. Ironically, though Stephanie could not have more children, the dynasty still lived on. But the real legacy of her story isn't in bloodlines. It's in the lessons she left behind. Stephanie's suffering shows how power, silence, and patriarchy combine to destroy women's health and happiness. Her illness wasn't rare. It wasn't exotic. It wasn't a mystery. It was common, preventable, and ignored. She was betrayed not just by her husband, but by a system that protected male privilege at all costs. This is why Stephanie's story matters today. Not for the drama or scandal, but for the truth it reveals. About power, about responsibility, about justice. Stephanie of Belgium was not a failed princess. She was a silenced victim. Her life was shaped by choices she never made and consequences she never deserved. In telling her story, we uncover a painful truth. That some of the worst royal tragedies weren't dramatic assassinations or secret plots, but everyday cruelty, medical negligence, and emotional abandonment, all hidden behind palace walls.